You're listening to In the NoCo, a daily slice of Northern Colorado news and happenings. It's Wednesday, October 11th. I'm Erin O'Toole. Today, we continue our look at the new season of KUNC's The Colorado Dream, which helps us understand how our state's housing crunch is affecting mountain communities.
We are so far behind in our housing needs.
And rents have gone up and housing prices have gone up.
Finding a house up here was extremely stressful.
Those are voices from the new season of The Colorado Dream. We have creator and host Stephanie Daniel with us today. Stephanie, welcome back to In the NoCo.
Hi, Erin. It's nice to be back.
So as we briefly discussed with you last week, the new season of the podcast unpacks how the state's housing crisis is disproportionately hurting mountain communities. Could you remind us why these towns are facing such a profound housing crunch?
Sure. Well, historically, there's been limited housing in these mountain resort communities. Now, of course, there's a reason folks love to live in and visit these places because they are surrounded by protected national forests with lots to do: skiing, fishing, hiking, biking. But that translates to small amounts of buildable land that usually come with high construction costs. But the housing issue has been exacerbated over the past several years. First, there's been an explosion of short-term rentals like Airbnb and Vrbo, which has greatly reduced the housing inventory, which in the past would have been long-term rentals for local workers. And then second, the pandemic. Remote workers moved to these locations and bought places in these mountain paradises, which really drove up home prices.
Right.
And a recent survey taken by Summit County residents shows just how critical the housing situation has become. In the next 5 years, the county will need 2,500 rental and for sale units at all price points to meet the demand.
So these issues have created a community-wide problem that's affecting a lot of residents in different ways. And these folks are teachers, police officers, restaurant workers. They come from all walks of life, and they are all vital members of these communities. Now, Steph, you begin in Summit County with the story of Javier Pineda Rosas, and I want to play a clip from him.
Even now, almost 30 years old, I don't have a stable living situation still. I still don't have access to buying or options to rent. And it has gotten really, really bad, like super bad.
You spent a lot of time with Javier. You two even went snowboarding together. Oh, I love that. So tell us more about why things have gotten so bad for him when it comes to finding stable housing.
Javier's story is similar to a lot of other Summit County residents. He's originally from Mexico, and when he was 12, he, his mom, and younger brother moved to Summit County to reunite with his father. And for the first couple of months, they stayed in a friend's living room, and that meant 8 people sharing a 2-bedroom apartment. Overcrowding was an issue back then, and it remains an issue now, especially for recently arrived immigrants. And Javier and his family then started moving around a lot, mainly because rents would go up. But also, some of the places that they lived in would get sold or turned into short-term rentals. Right now, Javier lives with his mom and younger siblings in the town of Dillon, but he really wants to buy a home in Summit County, but it's just so expensive, which of course a lot of other locals can relate to.
Right. And we can't discuss Javier's story without discussing the issue of equity, right? Paint a picture of what that equity component looks like in Summit County.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's come up during the podcast. One of the biggest equity challenges seems to be housing access for English-speaking residents versus Spanish-speaking residents. And the survey that I mentioned earlier was taken by both groups, and Spanish-speaking residents reported significantly higher rates of overcrowding, people sleeping on the floor or a couch, and they're also more likely to live in a hotel, rent a place without a lease agreement, which means that they can be kicked out anytime, and they're also more likely to be forced out of their homes. Now, the language barrier is another issue. Sometimes housing information is just posted in English, or, maybe there's not enough Spanish speakers to actually help residents navigate the county's housing process. Hispanic and Latinos make up at least 15% of the population, so this is a big issue.
And crucially, your reporting looks at what local governments are and aren't doing to address the housing crisis, including this equity component. So, what is happening in Summit County? And do residents think the government is doing enough?
So, what's really interesting is that in some ways there's a real sense of community. We're all in this together sort of sentiment around this issue because so many people are impacted by the lack of housing. And it's not just the people that you would normally think about. For example, if a restaurant owner can't find workers because there's no place for them to live, then that restaurant is going to fail. So, I think the county is taking a very proactive approach to solving this crisis. It has a 5-part strategic plan, which I won't get into all the details,
Right.
but it involves building new units, converting hotels into apartments, changing housing codes. So, they're really trying to find housing that will meet different people and their different needs. Now, as far as the equity issue goes, it's definitely a work in progress, but local county officials are meeting with groups like Mountain Dreamers, which advocates for the immigrant and Spanish-speaking community. And Mountain Dreamers and these other groups are really holding the county accountable to make sure that these housing processes are equitable.
Well, your reporting really reminds us what it means to have a home and what it means when you don't have stable housing. Talk about what you saw, how the struggle to find stable housing has cascading effects.
Well, let's just start with tourism. And tourism is the biggest industry in Summit County. But you need local workers to groom the ski slopes, work in the restaurants, provide medical care if someone gets injured, let's say if they're going on a hike. And if you don't have housing, where are those people going to live? They can't work there. And then, there's also the essential workers that every town needs. And you sort of mentioned that earlier. But, we're talking about the nurses, firefighters, teachers. They are a critical component of a community. And for that community to thrive, they need to live and work in that community. And of course, Erin, we're going to dig into this a lot more in the upcoming episodes of the podcast.
Well, we will look forward to all of those. KUNC Senior Managing Editor and host and creator of The Colorado Dream, Stephanie Daniel. Steph, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
Episode 1 of The Colorado Dream Housing Wanted is out now. Check it out wherever you like to listen to podcasts or find it at our website, kunc.org. In recent surveys, Coloradans have listed affordable housing as one of their biggest concerns. So we want to keep this issue front and center, but we need your help. Send us a note with how the housing crunch is affecting you. Email us at noco@kunc.org. That's NOCO@kunc.org. That's it for us today here on In the NoCo. Tomorrow, we'll look at what one college is doing to address the housing crisis in mountain communities like the ones Stephanie's been reporting on. Our producer is Jocelyn Mesa Miranda. Robin Vincent is our executive producer. I'm Erin O'Toole. See you next time.